The Stranded J Podcast.
Hello and welcome back to the Stranded J Podcast. I am your host, Stranded J, and we're going to have one topic this week with our discussion, and it's going to be probably the biggest thing we're going to be talking about for the next few months, and that is the new Superman movie directed by James Gunn. For anybody who knows and has been following this podcast since the beginning, you know this is a big deal for me, and for a lot of people, but specifically for me. Like, I kind of have been building a lot around this. We have a lot coming up in the podcast to kind of hype our way towards the release of Superman coming out in mid-July. And we got the full-length trailer. We got it this Wednesday, and they kind of announced it was going to be coming out that day. So people were pretty excited. Came out kind of midday, and so we've had the teaser, which came out, right before Christmas, and then we've had a few other things kind of come up between then. We've had, some preview videos. We've had some more TV spots. We've had some more kind of exclusive scenes. We've had an exclusive scene that came out before Minecraft, which was genius because a lot of people went and saw Minecraft, and I think that was a good call on the studio to have a kind of a big clip that kind of showed off kind of what the movie's going to feel like. And now we have the full-length trailer. I think a lot of people thought the teaser was like the main trailer. I did. It was a teaser. I mean, they did label it a teaser, but it felt like a real full-length trailer. It didn't, some teasers don't show you anything, and that showed us, no story beats, but a lot. It showed us a lot of just how that movie was going to feel. So I thought, that trailer was perfect. We talked about it in a previous episode, and I wasn't, I was excited to see more, but I was like, I don't know how much more James Gunn is going to show us. I was a little worried he may show too much. I was a little worried he was going to show kind of more of the same. And I think this trailer topped the teaser. Man, that was a good trailer. And I think a lot of people agree. This trailer is getting a ton of views on YouTube, just like the last one. And from what I've seen, the positivity is triumphant. Coming from someone who's been a fan of Superman his whole life and has seen a couple releases of Superman movies in his time, it's not like this. I got very hyped for them, and it seemed like I was about the only one. So it feels good to see kind of a consensus being that people are really excited for this movie. There are a lot of people now that are kind of changing their predictions on the box office. There are a lot of people who are changing their opinion on how it's going to do versus the new Jurassic World versus how it's going to do versus Fantastic Four. And that's all just assumptions. Like, it can go anywhere at this point, but it feels good to know that even in just comments, we live in the TikTok age, and we live in an age of a lot of social media. To be able to see comments instantaneously, I am seeing a lot more positivity than negativity. The negativity is there, and it's prominent and it's valid. But I think a lot of the negativity also kind of just is more of a nitpicky thing. I think a lot of people that I've seen that are like the consensus of people who are mostly negative, there's just certain aspects, whether it's the cinematography, whether it's the costume, things like that. Nothing like, oh, it just looks bad, I'm not going to see it, boo. So that's a good sign, and that's good to see. I really want this movie to do well. DC, I'm sure, really wants this movie to do well. They need a win. And so I thought, let's talk about this trailer, shall we? So if you haven't seen the trailer, make sure you go and watch it before we discuss this, because that's all we're talking about. But I'm assuming it seems like pretty much everybody has seen it at this point. And so, yeah, let's just jump right into it. So this trailer is I would say it's about the same length. I didn't really look as the teaser, but it definitely gives us a lot more insight on what we're going to be seeing. The teaser gave us a feel. This gave us more of the feel, but also just a general kind of idea of what themes are we going to be tackling. Some people, assumed this was going to be just a straight up kind of classic Superman tale of him, saving cats from trees, which is the vibe that they're giving for sure. But it's a little deeper than that. And ironically, it's very reminiscent of Zack Snyder's concepts of his Superman. And a lot of people have been talking about this online, how this Superman kind of relates to that Superman, but also is like, I don't think it's in a mean way, but James Gunn is going, Zack Snyder, you had some good points here. Let's just do it right. I mean, that's really what it feels like. It feels like there is like a lot of stuff that Zack Snyder was kind of, we were picking up what he was putting down, but I think the end result is very different. So this trailer starts with probably going to be one of the best scenes in the movie. I think a lot of people will say that. This is something that James Gunn has talked about in the audition process. Superman and Lois interview, which is a classic Superman story beat in many versions. One of my favorite scenes of all time is the terrace scene from 1978 Superman with Christopher Reeve and Margot Kidder. I think that between the cinematography, the acting, the music, everything is top notch in that movie from that scene. And it's this beautiful comic book. He sweeps her off her feet, and he's a little cheeky, but he's also he's exactly who you imagine Superman being when he likes a woman, but also he's being flirtatious, but still Superman. Like, it's perfect. This subverts that in the best way possible. You have the chemistry that has been needed for a very long time between Rachel Brosnahan and David Cornsweet, and you can just instantly tell just in this little clip of this scene that they are going to have some of the best chemistry in movies. It's just really, really natural, and I'm told that is the scene that they read for their auditions, and what kind of got James Gunn on board with both of those actors. And the reason this subverts it from the 1978 film is it's less of a superhero sweeper off her feet fantasy kind of thing, and more of a real discussion. First off, Clark and Lois, they don't have this situation where Lois doesn't know he's Superman. They already know. She already knows, and we've been kind of following that idea for more of a decade at this point, where in the comics they're married. I mean, and and she's known for a long time, but I think in the movies they're kind of getting to the point where, like, let's just skip that whole thing. We've told that story a million times. It's tired. It makes Lois come off very stupid when she's a Pulitzer Prize winning reporter. To just take that long to not get it is that's like the one thing that can be kind of left in the past. I know a lot of people will disagree with that, but I think that's just for the story's sake of movies and stuff. I think people are just ready to move on from that a little bit. Kind of like how some people are ready to move on from Peter Parker in high school, things like that. Like, I think it's just something we've seen plenty of in many other versions, that to just tell a story based off of these two and their relationship post her figuring out who Clark is, who Superman is, all this is something fresh. Even after a decade of trying it, I think we're finding new things with it. And so they're just hanging out, and he offers to have her interview him as Superman. And this is the first time we've been able to see Dave and Cornsweet have some dialogue, which from all intents and purposes, I think I totally trust him. I hear he's a great actor. I haven't seen him in much, just some clips online. And so I wasn't, 100% sure. And I was waiting to see how he was going to do this, because all we've seen is in his action, which is great. Everything I've seen of him in the physicality of it and everything is great. But I wanted to see how he does in dialogue, and he instantly nails it. I mean, he does kind of this voice thing going from just, because there's always regular Clark, there is Clark Kent news reporter, and then there's Superman, and they're all different. And I think the real Clark is in between. He's the one who goes and hangs out with Mom and Pa on the farm and things like that. And in this, you can tell that he starts out that way, and then he kind of uses a Superman voice. And it subverts it because it turns into a very deep philosophical discussion with Lois playing devil's advocate for the other side. And that is quintessential Lois. And that's the other thing we're seeing a lot so far in this movie, at least from the trailers, is we're finally getting some of these characters presented as they are in the comic books. A lot of people have a lot of misinterpretation on how these characters are in the comics, because they've seen so many versions of them in TV and in film, which are great. But there's other levels to them that we just haven't seen. One thing I think that we've gotten stuck into with Superman in particular is how people think he's boring. And the reason they think he's boring is because they think of the Christopher Reeve portrayal, which is not boring. I'm not saying that, but he portrays one side of it where he is the stoic, kind of not all knowing. He's lost himself, but he's very confident in all of his choices. And he's kind of become the Superman that is peak Superman. Who is very, he knows what he's doing, and he's very confident in it all. And this is great in this version because he is confident, and he does have like those morals, and he's very staunch in his morality, and he doesn't like question as much. It's just he doesn't have the patience that Superman has, which is a sign of him being human. And the number one thing that people forget about the Superman character is that Clark, even though he's an alien, he is more human than the rest of us because he loves humanity so much, and he studied them for so long, and he was raised among them for so long, that he is like what the purest version of humanity should be at all times. And the purest version isn't the perfect version. The purest version is the most relatable version. And what's more relatable than getting frustrated with a concept and getting frustrated with ideals? And so Lois, is like, you stopped where he's kind of bragging he stopped a war. And she's like, but did you consult the president? Did you consult the government in this way? And he's getting frustrated and frustrated. It leads to like a straight up blowout, which we do not see often. That is very, very true to Superman in many ways. Superman doesn't just have this. He's not this stoic, patient statue of a man. He has emotions, and he believes in what he believes, and he's passionate about a lot of things, and he questions a lot of things. And so we're leading into this philosophical question and this moral question of, Superman, he can kind of go wherever he wants and do whatever he wants. A government would be kind of uncomfortable to that idea, and they would wonder, can we trust him? Can we do this? Can we do that? And Superman is like, of course you can trust me, but that doesn't mean it's instantly going to lead to great things for both sides and everyone's going to just agree. Superman is going to go where people need help. It doesn't matter where, it doesn't matter who, it doesn't matter what jurisdiction. He's going to help people. And so by the end of this argument, it leads to him screaming, people are going to die. People were going to die. And that's the point, right? Is, I don't care what red tape is out there in this world. I have the means to stop it. I have the means to make this a better world and to help people that need help that normally wouldn't get the help they need. And I'm going to do that. I don't care who says I can't. I am going to. On the other hand, you have Lois kind of saying, well, you can't just go through these things and just sidestep all of these rules in life or in the government and law. And so that's kind of where we're left. And that is a very similar thing to what Zack Snyder was doing in Batman v Superman. The problem is not even really the problem, just the difference is, on one hand, you have a very cynical take on Superman and everyone kind of feeling the same way about Superman in Batman v Superman. And then you have this version where people feel similar, and Superman reacts very differently. You have one Superman who's very passionate and very emotional about it, and he is like, I only care about saving people. I don't want people to die. I want to help people. Then you have another Superman who questions these things and is more, he ponders these questions, and he doesn't care, but he also doesn't say anything to say how he feels about it much. And it's more in depth than that, but like it's just I think Zack Snyder had kind of a point to it, and I think it was a good point, but I don't think it was executed the way it should have been. I think James Gunn is trying to, and no Snyder fanboy is ever going to acknowledge this. I think he's trying to go, look, there's some good stuff here. Let's flesh it out a little bit, and let's take the pure version of this character and make him a little more comic book accurate and have him come to terms with these answers and confront these answers. So we'll see where it goes. But, if you've read a Superman comic, I think kind of where this will go. And I think this is going to end in a more hopeful outcome where This is where you're seeing a large crowd of people throwing cans at him as he's walking, but then you also have people that he's crashing after a fight or during a fight, and a normal human, civilian runs up and helps him up. That is the point of Superman right there. That is the point, is he gives people hope to be better and to do better, and they trust him in that way because of the trust he's shown. And it's going to be an interesting contrast, to say the least. But essentially we get that first interview scene, which kind of kicks off this idea, right? And then we start to see a little bit more that we didn't get to see in the teaser, such as more Lex Luthor. We hear his voice, which he sounds just like Lex Luthor in not only in dialogue, but in the cartoon adaptation of All-Star Superman. I think he has that very kind of, his intelligence is leading his demeanor. And I think that's great. I'm super excited to see how he approaches it, because I think that's where he's going with it. And that's a great take on Lex, where he's just too smart to even sound normal. And he speaks not in riddle, but in just high intelligence. And it's all philosophical talk and stuff like that too. But I'm excited for that. I think Nicholas Holt's going to just nail that. I think he's going to be the best Lex Luthor we've seen in live action, outside maybe Michael Rosenbaum, which I can tell a lot of people have said this, and I agree. I think this is very similar to that, where what if, Michael Rosenbaum's Lex Luthor from Smallville grew up a little bit more, and this is the next step in that evolution. I think that's what we're going to see, and that's great. I think that's a great way to go. But we see more of that. We see more of kind of these trials that Superman's going through. There's been a lot of rumor, not sure how reputable they are, but there's been a lot of rumor that this movie is going to have a lot of chapters, essentially similar to All-Star Superman, which is a big inspiration for James Gunn in this movie, where every issue is kind of its own story. And it's a little more serialized that way, but it has this kind of overarching plot as well that kind of gives this overarching lesson to not only the character of Superman, but the world itself. I think we're going to get something similar to that. We're seeing a lot of enemies. We're seeing a lot of villains and a lot of heroes. I don't think all of them are going to be in the movie at all times. I think they're going to kind of appear, and their arc is going to happen, and they're going to move on to something else. I think that's where a lot of people are nervous that he's not going to be able to balance all of these characters. And I think that's where the balance is going to be, is you got to think of it that way. Who knows? I could be 100% wrong, but that's kind of what I've been kind of picking up on as we've been kind of watching more of these clips come out. But we're seeing him, fight that giant kaiju. We're seeing him fight this like Ultraman. I mean, they think it's Ultraman. He's in a suit. We've seen him confronting Lex himself. We've seen him captured. There's a lot of Superman getting his ass kicked in these trailers. And I think that's a lot of the plot as well, is to show this resilient Superman of him, no matter how many times he's getting beaten down. Lex is kind of, it shows him infiltrating the Fortress of Solitude. It shows him capturing Superman, somebody capturing Superman. It shows them beating up Superman as he's captured. It shows him getting beat up in the city as he's fighting monsters. It shows his suit getting damaged, all of these things. And I think the idea is that no matter what he's going through, he's always going to stick true to what he believes in. And by the end of it, he's going to inspire the people to do better as well. So that's the impression I'm getting so far with that overarching aspect as well. We haven't seen a lot of the Daily Planet players, I like to call them. So like Jimmy Olsen and Perry White. We've seen Lois, obviously. And then you have some of the other journalists that have appeared over the past few years in the story that are in it. But we just haven't seen a lot of scenes with them yet. So I'm interested to see where that goes. We saw a little bit more Crypto when the Fortress of Solitude's getting kind of ransacked by Lex. He kind of kicks at the engineer and shows him defending the fortress. We see more Ma and Pa Kent, which was great. I love the new twist that they're doing with that. James Gunn has said that he is inspiring the Kent farm and Smallville to be a little bit more what he was inspired by when he was growing up in Missouri. So they live in like a kind of a fancy double wide, and Ma and Pa are not these kind of calendar versions of farmers. Like, they are very accurate. I do think someone mentioned this. I do think that Ma has a little too much of like a Southern kind of accent, but I digress. But it's kind of a new modern kind of take that I think is interesting. They're not all going to look like Kevin Costner. And I love that, but they have like the message behind them and how supportive they are. That's a stark contrast to Snyder's stuff with Pa. I'm excited to see. I think there's going to be kind of the all hope is lost moment where I think Clark is kind of going to be, sorry if I'm spoiling anything. I don't think so. I mean, I don't know. I've not seen the movie. I have no idea, but like, you're kind of getting this vibe, right? That something's going to happen that's going to lead Superman to have to kind of go into hiding for a little bit. And I think he goes back home to Smallville, and he has kind of this all hope is lost moment where I think he gets kind of rallied by not only his parents, but Lois and the world. And he comes back for this final triumphant return to help. And I'm excited to see where that goes. I'm excited to see kind of how that plays out. Then we have, some of the Justice. I thought it was the Justice Society, but they're calling them like the Justice Gang. I think it's because they're doing a lot with Maxwell Lord, and they're wearing kind of suits that he has provided them. And I think they're kind of their own version. It's before the Justice League. It's not the Justice Society, but I think it's going to become something where Superman's kind of like, look, I like this concept of us teaming up as heroes and saving people, but this is not the way to do it. So they kind of reform and become the Justice League. And then that's when we're going to start seeing other characters and other media join as well. Saw a couple shots of Rick Flag Sr., which is exciting. He obviously was in Creature Commandos over the winter, the first kind of full-length DC Universe James Gunn run thing. That was the animated series. So we saw him do the voice. Now he's going to be in live action for this. We've seen him also in the new Peacemaker season 2 trailer. So there's already a lot of crossover going on, and that's where I'm not too worried about these characters kind of appearing in this. They're not going to overhog the story, I don't think, because I think they're going to kind of show up to kind of play their part, and they're going to also show up to kind of be introduced a little bit, but they're going to move on pretty quick, or they're going to kind of appear throughout the movie, but they're not going to be the central focus, because we're going to be we've already seen Guy Gardner appear in the Peacemaker trailer as well. So I think there's plenty of time for them to be fleshed out. And I think James Gunn knows that. He just wants to start planting a few seeds, and he wants to play with these characters. It's really hard when you want to start, like, say, like for instance, like the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man movies. They didn't have, they have all those rights issues. They still have all these rights issues with Marvel. And so they can't always play in the massive toy box of characters that they have. They can only use kind of with the intention of, well, we would love to someday, but right now we can only focus on these people. And so it makes the world a little bit smaller. If you're really trying to go for the comic book approach, you have to have these appearances of characters. They're coming and going all the time. They're referenced all the time. They don't always have to be an integral part to the story, but if you don't acknowledge some of these characters from the jump, it makes the world smaller, and you're building a universe here, and you have to have kind of all of them copacetically appearing and reappearing and helping in some small way. So I think that they're doing a good job with that, and that's why we're getting a Supergirl movie next year. I think next year. It just finished filming. And I think they're just planting those seeds, because you don't have to build this. You don't always have to do the Avengers thing, and that's the issue that we had with the Justice League movie with Zack Snyder or Joss Whedon, whoever you want to pick, is they just were so in a hurry to get the Justice League, just like the Avengers, but the Avengers, they took their time with it. You don't even have to approach it that way. You don't have to be like, this is all building to the Justice League movie. It's just, we're telling stories in this universe, and in this universe, there are these characters. And if you're going to have these characters in this universe, they're going to sometimes appear. They're going to appear, and they're going to help out for a minute, and they're going to leave and do their own thing. So that's kind of where we're heading, I think. And I think that's a kind of a more natural way to handle such a huge, long, historied, old universe like this. So I'm excited for that. A lot of great action from what we're seeing. A lot of different fights. I think the one that everyone's been really getting excited for in this one is... hey, buddy, eyes up here, and he flies straight up. That's a huge part of the trailer to also show a little bit of the fun of Superman in this. But I also just love that, in that interview scene, Clark is so confident and kind of playful and flirty and cheeky. And then she kind of just comes in and rocks him with these hard questions. And he thinks they're going to be softball questions because it's Lois and he's Superman. And it's fun to see, like, it's a good portrayal of Lois in that way of she is all about the scoop, man. She's not going to just stop because it's Superman. Yeah, she loves Superman, but she's also going to question things if she has to. That's what makes Lois Lois. So that's great as well. Kind of going back to the theme of it all, I guess the theme of it going into kind of the music aspect of it is we're still hearing this John Williams theme. It's not, it's not just a complete redo of it. There's a lot of just callbacks in many ways. It's obviously the John Williams score, but they're playing with it. They, in the teaser, they had the electric guitar. They're kind of emphasizing certain parts of the song. I'm interested to see how that plays throughout. I think there's a lot of people who are like, every Superman deserves his own theme. I disagree. I think Superman has gotten to the point now where take what works and then especially take things that work and make them your own, as opposed to you don't have to do everything from scratch. I actually really loved the Man of Steel soundtrack. I loved kind of the theme to that as well. Every time you get something new, whether it's the animated series was great or the Fleischer series, whatever it is, they're all pretty iconic, but the John Williams one is obviously the one that everyone knows most, and it's the one that I think it's the most grand. So when you're making a Superman movie, you have to kind of have that to show that this is a serious Superman movie, right? But I think the theme, along with the movie, is telling us what they're kind of looking for is like a happy medium between Man of Steel and Superman 1978. Superman Returns was too much like a Superman 1978 like kind of copy, and Man of Steel was too far from that. So you had, I think that's kind of the template, right? That's the first one that worked. It's what's kicked off this whole Superman or superhero boom, and it's the first time they took the verisimilitude of it, and they found the perfect balance. And I think James Gunn he's the most inspired by the comics and from those movies, but I think he's also looking at it as a perspective of like, let's look at the history of this character, especially in movies. And so we've had 78, which worked really well, and then we had a huge hiatus. And then I think the idea was, it's 2006, Bryan Singer's sitting here going, let's make another Superman movie, but let's go back to the roots of what made it successful, which is the Christopher Reeve stuff, the John Williams theme, Dick Donner, all this stuff. And they took, they basically continued the canon where they wanted to of those movies with new actors, and they used the theme, very, very true theme. And I think that wasn't quite I actually like that movie for the most part, but like I don't think that was the approach to kind of kickstart this character into a new generation and to kind of reintroduce him to a new audience. It felt like a kind of too much of a love letter, and it was a little too derivative, and I think it just kind of lost people. And then with Man of Steel, you had kind of let's just completely change this and subvert everyone's expectations of what a Superman movie is, how he acts, how his universe works, who's involved, all of these things, new theme, new suit, new ideas. And I think some of them worked really well, but it was also way ambitious in a kind of a way that I think it strayed a little too far from Superman and what the core of Superman is, especially in the comics. And I think we saw that kind of with the Superman Lives that was supposed to come out in the 90s. I think they were going to try to do the same thing, because it's really hard for people to want to be like, let's start fresh. We don't want to, rely on this that worked. We want to try something new. But then if you try something too new, you stray too far. And I think James Gunn's looked at that and he's kind of like, look, this is kind of where we can be, right? We can show it in our music. We have the Superman John Williams theme, but we're going to not just kind of cut exactly what it is and just use it throughout religiously. We're going to like play with it, and we're going to show, that this is a core aspect of this character now, but it's also, we're going to make it new. We're going to add new spin to it. We're going to add new themes to it on top, things like that. And the story's doing the same. We have, a lot of Zack Snyder kind of ideas from Man of Steel, and we have a lot of true to comic and Dick Donner 1978 Superman. And I think he's just looking for that happy medium, that great balance between the two. And it seems to be working so far. You have a new generation that are now looking at it and they're going, I kind of grew up with some of this. Like, I remember this song. I remember some of this stuff. I like seeing, we're all clamoring for a more hopeful version of Superman, especially after so many years of Injustice Gods Among Us and, even Zack Snyder stuff. And then you have The Boys and you have all these versions, even in Invincible, you kind of have some of that. And so I think everyone's kind of just clamoring for a hopeful Superman, but that just because he's hopeful doesn't mean it has to be a old man's kind of tale of a 1930s character that is for a modern time. I think you can take bits of that and then take bits of what we're dealing with in the real world right now, which regardless of politics, we have a lot of conflict. We have a lot of conflict in ourselves. We have a lot of conflict in ourselves as a society, but we also have a lot of conflict overseas. We have a lot of wars going on that are not as cut and dry as these are the bad guys, these are the good guys. And especially in a country like ours, there are some wars going on that we're not involved in fully, that we're just kind of looking at and saying, I think I side with these people. This is fair. And then there's other people saying, I side with these people. And it's not nearly as cordial as that. There's a lot of discourse. But we're in a very complicated time in our history. And Superman needs to show that a little bit because this character in the 30s was created by Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster to inspire themselves during the Great Depression and during a time where you couldn't trust anyone. You couldn't trust your officials. You couldn't trust your government. You couldn't trust landlords. Most of these issues were, mine owners who were abusing their workers and not making it safe. And he was, showing them in a very brute force kind of way, or wife beaters, or landlords who are just completely like destroying the building, like things like this. That's all from the start. He was a man of the people from the start. And in times of trouble, when the people are in trouble, Superman will appear in the story and in the real life, where people will get inspired and they'll have a story to tell of Superman. 1978, I think it's hard now because in 2025, people who had grown up in the 70s, like myself, they look back and they kind of look at that movie as kind of, oh, that's like right out of a comic book, campy Superman in the best way. But it's, it's very like he literally pulls a cat out of the tree. But what people don't understand is you can go back and you can watch movies from that era in the 1970s. And it was a very gritty, dark time for a lot of people. You had the Watergate scandal. You couldn't trust the government again. You had a lot of financial crises. New York was a kind of a police state with lots of blackouts and scary things going on. There's a lot of stuff that was kind of boiling up within the Cold War, and there's a lot of stuff that's boiling up that's leading into the next decade of the 80s. And it was an uncertain time, and people didn't trust their neighbors. Christopher Reeve said it in an interview, and you couldn't trust a lot of people. And he said, what people need most is a friend in all the best ways. And that's Superman. He's the guy that's going to show up and say, look, the world may be rough right now, but we can make it better. Let's do it together. I'm here with you. And that is when he is most effective. And it's always been that way. That's why he's been an icon to the world for so long, since 1938. And he's held strong, and he hasn't become a fossil like the Phantom or somebody like that. That's kind of a pulp hero that kind of got lost in the sauce, because he's been reinvented in all the best ways for each generation. But also each generation can relate with the past because we run into similar situations. We all kind of get down and don't believe in things and get cynical, and people screw us over in life, and we feel like we can't get a leg up, and Superman's there to help us get through that. So that's kind of happening with this movie, I think. I think that's why it's a good time for it. And I also think it's why it's getting such a positive response, because I think sometimes it's just not the right time for Superman, for general audiences. And I'm not saying he's not needed, but he is, there's very specific boiling points within our world as a society where we could use this character most. And we've seen it time and time again, and now is another time. And so we'll see, maybe it flops at the box office. I have my doubts at this point. This is, like I said, coming from someone who, got excited for Superman Returns, coming from someone who got excited about Man of Steel, Batman v Superman, all those. This feels different. Not just because it's a different take, and not just because they're kind of trying a different approach. It feels different. The environment feels different. It feels kind of like when in 2015 when Star Wars The Force Awakens was starting to kind of pick up its steam, and then J.J. Abrams was like showing, behind the scenes of kind of the puppetry. People were kind of sick of the CG Star Wars from, the decade prior, and they really wanted something that felt like what they saw from the original trilogy, but also they wanted to see some new aspects. And regardless of what you think of the sequel trilogy of Star Wars, that Force Awakens movie became like one of the highest grossing movies of all time. And at one point it was the highest grossing movie of all time. It didn't become that for no reason. There was a lot of people who were excited. There's a lot of buzz, and it was the right time for that movie. It was the exact time people needed a Star Wars movie just like that. And so it feels kind of like that with this movie. It feels like there's just this extra buzz to it that you don't always get. And you got it with a lot of Marvel movies. I mean, Avengers Endgame came out exactly at the right time. It was right before COVID. We had been waiting a decade to see kind of all of this come together, and we hit a conclusion. And it was the perfect time. And I'll never, I think, have a better movie experience than I did seeing Avengers Endgame opening night in theaters. There are just movies like that, especially superhero movies or franchise movies, that, sometimes people just aren't needing them right now. They're needing something different for that moment. But right now, or in those moments, it hits right at the right time. And Superman, I think, is going to do that. I'm just getting that feeling. I think Fantastic Four, depending on how they approach that story too, I think that's much needed for Marvel. It's how it was when Iron Man hit. I think everyone was kind of looking for something. We had this kind of dark and gritty kind of, everything kind of felt like it had this sheen of early 2000s on it. And Iron Man comes out and kind of subverts that with its humor and with its action, but also its kind of bright nature and kind of not whimsy, but it just had kind of this feel that it kind of kick-started the new generation of movies for superheroes. Dark Knight did that as well at the same exact time. And we'll see, but I'm getting feelings of that now. So those are my thoughts on the trailer of Superman, the actual main trailer. Like I said, if you haven't seen it now, where have you been? Go check it out. It's amazing. It's awesome. I've watched it like 30,000 times in the past 4 days. And I think a lot of people have too, because it's getting quite a few views online. I think that's all I need to see now, though. I think I'm ready for the movie. We're just about, we're about 2 months away. And I think I don't need much else. I'm excited for some, like, the merch to come in like Star Wars does, where you're starting to see all these kind of Superman things everywhere. Like, everything I see, I have to like stop myself from buying it. Like, oh, there's a Superman lunchbox. I don't need that. I don't take my lunch, but I'm excited, so I gotta buy it. We're kind of hitting that point, which is exciting, and it's kind of the summer of Superman. We're getting a lot of stuff in the comics that's exciting. They're kind of crossing over with the movie promotions, which is exciting. So I'm excited for all that, but I don't think I need many more clips. I think I'm just ready for the movie, and I got to see the movie. So. Tell me what your guys' thoughts were on this. You know how I feel now. Leave them in the comments. If you disagree with me, by all means, leave them in the comments and tell me how kind of your thoughts, because, I've seen many different opinions, as well. So, let me know there. We are gonna, I'm sorry guys. I know if some people are kind of listening to this podcast, excited for, kind of the deep cinephile, discussions. We will have those in the future, but I'm sorry, man, we're hitting summer and it's all about superheroes this year. It's the first time in a while that we've had just so much going on with superheroes. I'm excited to kind of jump into some more ideas. We're going to do some kind of fun countdowns with the Superman movie as we get closer. That I can't wait. There's going to be some fun episodes with some collaborations and some fun episodes where you guys will be able to participate. So stay tuned for all of that. But for the time being, just sit back, relax, and just enjoy, I think, what is kind of going to be a kind of monumental summer for a lot of reasons for movies, especially superhero movies. Don't take it too seriously. Just enjoy it. It's not going to last forever. And while we have it, just have fun with it, because we're getting some really great stuff. And I think some people are finally finding their footing with these characters and with these franchises. So let's wait and see what happens, but I'm hopeful, and I hope you guys are too. But thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys in the next episode.